Hey, so this is week one of Baking with Desserts by Drey. Not quite sure if that's going to be what I call it, but that's what it is. You're baking with me, Dr. Drey, the proud owner of Desserts by Drey. So, as I stated in my intro, I have 12 cookbooks and I pick randomly a number is selected, and that's how I determine the cookbook. And then a number is selected randomly to determine the page number that I will use to get the recipe. So this week is book 8, which is Paula Dean's Southern Baking. So I went to Tennessee and we went to Paula Dean's restaurant and I purchased this book. I have used it a couple of times, but for the most part, all of these recipes are new to me. So this was book 8 and I had page number 74, which is a photograph, but the picture goes with the recipe of the coconut skillet cake. I will post pictures on so that you can see what the recipe is and how it's supposed to look. The only thing that I needed to purchase when I planned to make this was a skillet. And I was like, man, I don't have a skillet. So adulting, I need a skillet. So I purchased a skillet and I also needed just one other ingredient. So I am going to try this recipe. I'm excited because this is not something that I would normally make. I have made a coconut cake before, never have used a skillet to make a cake at all. So let's see how it goes. All right, so first I'm going to introduce the ingredients that we will be using. So we have 3/4 cups of softened butter. The recipe does say unsalted, however, I personally prefer to use salted. We have 1 cup of granulated sugar, 4 large egg whites, and I was close to getting them all in there without breaking them, but 3 out of 4 isn't too bad for me. We also have a teaspoon of coconut extract, which I will be using coconut emulsion, and I'll use half of a teaspoon in the cake and then half in the frosting. Then we have 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Another change that I made is that I'm using cake flour because that is my personal preference, especially if I'm going to make a cake or a dessert. I prefer to use cake flour. Then I have 2/3 cups of sour cream, and this is room temperature. The room temperature eggs, sour cream, and butter. Here I have 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And that is all for the cake portion. So the first thing that I'm going to do is set my oven to 375, and I'm going to spray down my handy dandy cast iron skillet, which I normally don't bake anything without putting parchment paper, but because I want to see how this goes, I don't know. No, I think I'm going to put the parchment paper. I don't know. I think so. I don't want to mess up my cast iron skillet, and I want the cake to come out good. So I'm going to spray it with baking spray, and then cooking olive oil cooking spray, and then I'm going to put a parchment paper in there so that the cake doesn't stick to the pan, especially in the center where I may not be able to get to it easily if it does stick a little. So I'm going to do that and I'll be back with the next steps. Alright, so as you can see, I have sprayed down my pan and I put in my pre-cut parchment paper, which has been a time saver. I would say lifesaver or a game changer, but it's definitely a time saver. So my next step is in a large bowl, I'm going to beat the butter and sugar with a mixer at medium speed until fluffy, and that'll be about 3 to 4 minutes. And I'm going to scrape it down in between. Then I will add egg yolks one at a time, beating well after each addition, and then put in half of a teaspoon of coconut extract. So, gonna get that started and I'll be back. So it's been about 2 minutes of the butter going. And I just want to show you all what it looks like. It's getting a little pale, which is what it's supposed to do. So I'll beat it for 2 more minutes. And I am using the paddle on my KitchenAid, which this is another reason why I wanted to do this, because I rarely use my KitchenAid stand mixer. I just feel like my love for my in my baking comes through my hands. But we're gonna give the KitchenAid some use with these new recipes. So yeah, this is my KitchenAid and it's gonna get used now. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so let me add that I will be messing up, because guess what, I already messed up. I completely forgot to add the sugar while I was mixing the butter, but it's okay. The butter, I did it for 3 minutes by itself. Now I'm doing it for 4 more minutes with the sugar. Not going to harm the cake at all. It'll still be good. So my butter and sugar is almost done, and then I'm going to start adding the egg yolks one at a time, mixing it well and scraping down the sides. I'll be back and show you what that looks like. Here is my butter and sugar, and as you can see, it is paler than it was before with just the butter and after it was creaming for 2 minutes. So I'm going to start with the eggs now. Alright, so this is the butter, sugar, and coconut flavoring. And now the next step says, in a medium bowl, whisk together flour, baking powder, baking soda, and salt. So here's my 2 cups of cake flour, which is what I substituted. And now I'm going to add those other dry ingredients. And then just give them a little mix. Just use my little spoon and just give it a little stir so that it's distributed as evenly as possible. Set that to the side. Now I'm going to start mixing the flour mixture in the sour cream, slowly making sure it's mixed well in between, and then it'll be almost done. So I'll be back after I incorporate the flour in the sour cream, making sure not to overmix it in between, just getting them in there and mixed together. Alright, so here you can see my ingredients. I have been mixed. Now, one thing that I did fail to mention with the ingredients, I'll be folding in 1 cup of coconut flakes. So that's going in here. I'm going to fold it in and then prepare my pan to go in the oven. Alright, so here is the cake all done, all mixed, and now I'm going to place it in the oven and bake it for 25 to 35 minutes, and then I will come back while it's baking and get started on the icing. Alright, so I am back to make the frosting or icing for the coconut skillet cake, and I have 1 cup of cold heavy whipping cream in my mixing bowl already. As you can see, I have switched to my whisk for my stand mixer because I am doing a frosting or icing. So I'm going to use the whisk, and I'm going to mix my heavy whipping cream on medium until it is foamy. Then I will add in 1 tablespoon of confectioner's sugar and a little vanilla in the other half tablespoon of my coconut emulsion, and that will be it. But my cake is still in the oven. It still has 4 minutes, and then it has to cool. So on my next video, well, you'll see parts of the frosting, but then the final video will be me building my cake. All right, so my heavy whipping cream is foamy, so I'm going to go ahead and add in my my half teaspoon of coconut emulsion, my tablespoon of confectioner's sugar or powdered sugar, and then my 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and keep whipping it until it has soft peaks. All right, so I almost forgot to record this, but here is the final, I wouldn't even call it an icing, my final topping for the cake. It is very light, like a whipped cream, not sweet at all. So I'm hoping that it pairs well with the cake. I didn't want to change it by adding more sugar, so I'm just going to leave it as is and hope that the cake is sweet enough to balance it. And then I'm going to put some coconut flakes on top, so that'll be a little bit more texture and sweetness to it. The cake, it finished its 25 minutes, but it wasn't quite brown enough, so I put it in for 5 more minutes and has 1 more minute. All right, so here is the final product for the cake. I almost feel like I need to just put some butter on it and eat it like cornbread, because that's what it looks like to me. But I'm excited. I ended up baking it for 35 minutes. At 25 minutes, I checked it and it just wasn't brown enough. Then at 30 minutes, it was brown, but it was not cooked in the middle at all. It was very wet, so I'm surprised that at 35 minutes it seems to be cooked well in the middle. I used a toothpick to check it, and we will see when it is time to cut it. So I'm going to let it cool for a few minutes, then I will take it out of the pan and then let it cool completely before putting the toppings on it. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the coconut skillet cake. My first time making this recipe. The things that I tweaked were that I put cake flour instead of all-purpose flour, and that is it. So I'm now going to cut into this cake and give it a taste and see what it's like. Alright, so even though I can barely upload a YouTube video, I didn't want y'all to think there was any TV magic. In case you're wondering why it's so hard to cut this cake, it is not room temperature, which is how I prefer my cakes and recommend that to my clients for the most part. Maybe I should have used some TV magic and waited for this cake to get to room temperature. But it is very cold right now, which is why it's not cutting well, but it's okay. It's proof that there is no TV magic here. Like I said, maybe later down the line when I learn some editing skills, holla at your girl if you want to teach her. I'm just going to grab this. Let me lay this down so that you all can see. I thought that the cake was going to be more dense, just based off of the batter when I poured it into the pan, but it actually looks really light and airy. I'm going to taste it now while it's still cold, and then I'll come back when it's room temperature, but I want to taste it now while you all are here. Move this one out of the way. All right. So I'm just gonna get a tiny piece. Mm-mm. Okay, but it's actually pretty good. Okay, so excuse me. I just tried the coconut skillet cake, and it is a very light cake. Doesn't feel very guilty, meaning it's not sweet. But it is a solid coconut flavor, and if you're the type of person that likes coconut flavor but not the what do you call it, the texture, this is not the cake for you. Sorry if it's my lighting. Again, no TV magic. But yeah, this is not the cake for you. You can definitely taste, feel the texture of the coconut. But if you do like coconut, this is a really good cake. I do look forward to tasting it when it's room temperature and just feeling the texture of the cake to see how light it is. If it is dense, similar to like a pound cake, or just light and airy like a regular cake. But I'll come back and let you all know. Okay, so last video, I just want to show you all that the cake is not hard or baked hard. It was just the coldness of the cake. So as you can see, it's still a little hard, but it is much easier, and that's because the cake is getting to room temperature. I actually went ahead and tasted the cake. It's still pretty cold, but not like frozen like it was before. And listen, it's still good. It really is.